The following video contains spoilers for Alien Romulus and Deadpool and Wolverine. Although in the latter case, if you've watched trailers at all, you already know everything I'm going to talk about. Trailers. They're fun sometimes. I have a tendency to complain about trailers because I will, not as consistently as I used to, but I will do reactions over on my secondary channel, Break Room of Geeks. And many of those start with a sort of bit of frustration on my part because I don't keep track of when trailers are supposed to be coming out if there is advance notice. And so they just tend to drop and throw off my workflow. But like they are fun. And a nearly evergreen topic that is something that folks like me can cycle back to every couple of years is, are we getting too many spoilers in the trailers? And the thing is, yes, this is not exactly a new topic, new point of discussion, but I want to cite a couple of very specific recent examples for the weird ways in which this question formed in my head this time around. So I'm primarily going to be referencing two films here, Deadpool and Wolverine and Alien Romulus. Now, both of these I have seen, both of these I have reviews. Again, those are up in the Break Room of Geeks. But here's the thing. Part of the reason I actually got out to Alien Romulus and saw it in its first weekend was out of a morbid curiosity. Because the trailer really looked like it gave away the whole movie. Like, we had our initial setup, it introduced all the characters, it showed us who got hit with a face hugger early on, it showed us who got the chest burster, so we already knew who that was going to be. It showed us the massive flood of face huggers that were going to be coming out. It seemed like it had dropped a couple of its surprises, i.e. heavier emphasis on the face hugger, and we already know which one the alien's gonna burst out of, and this whole thing's just going for a major vibe of the first Alien, especially in its marketing. So if you're aping the first Alien, you show us this much, what is there left to do? We already know which character the xenomorph's gonna pop out of, and then it's the first movie again, right? Well, no. Alien Romulus, which is good, but I do have issues with. I would say I like the two best Alien movies are indisputable. It's Alien and Aliens. Which one you put on top, that's personal preference, but those are the two best ones. After that, I feel like you could make an argument of almost equal measure for different reasons of Prometheus, Alien 3, or Alien Romulus being the third best. For me, it's Prometheus out of those, but I would say that I would expect one of those three to occupy the number 3 spot for most people. But it does have a fair amount of stuff that it does, and actually quite a bit of stuff after the points at which we were seeing stuff in the trailer. Because I thought the trailer had violated one of my cardinal rules of trailer cutting. Don't show anything from the back third. My actual rules don't show anything from the back half, but definitely don't show anything from the last third of the movie. And looking back, I don't think it did, actually. Not more than a couple of flashes. And that was actually kind of surprising to see. But it still makes me wonder if that was the best idea with the trailer. Now, obviously, it's weird for me to say, was this trailer a good idea when this movie is proven to be very successful? So obviously, something's working. So when I say, are these things good ideas, I'm talking from an artistic perspective, not a business one. This is a conversation with, like, I don't have a problem engaging with the business side of things, but we're not doing the business side today. That's just not part of the conversation that I feel like having. Because what was weird was once I realized, oh, there's a ton more to this movie. What was funny about those trailers, they still felt like they showed the whole movie just because of the number of beats and how far along the story they went. Because they showed us what could have been a whole movie. Now, there was more after that, but I was kind of initially reluctant to go and see it because I'm like, I feel like I've already seen the whole thing. The main reason I went was morbid curiosity to see if I was right. I wasn't, but it is kind of an odd approach to me when you structure your trailer in such a way that it looks like you've done the whole movie, even if you haven't. Now, I don't know if more audiences are actually like me, where like that makes me less inclined to watch it because I feel like I already know everything that's going to happen. But that brings us to the much more bizarre, strange, and interesting to talk about situation with Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, this is a case where the trailers leading up to the release, I don't really have a ton to say about. You know, they held back a lot of stuff, like a lot. But then, after the movie had been out for a week or two, revised trailers started coming out, dropping massive things that had been pointedly left out of the marketing so that they could be surprises.
Avengers Flame on! Sorry, what now?
We don't know that guy.
We thought we did.
That was another one I saw the first weekend. And so I got to see the surprise of realizing that A, Chris Evans was even in this, B, that he's playing Johnny Storm, Channing Tatum as Gambit, Blade, Elektra, all these things. And like, it's really, really fun. It was really fun to discover that in the moment. And then I started seeing some of that stuff show up in the trailers. I'm like, what are you doing? Here's the thing. I feel like I can point to a surprise that was spoiled by some of the later pre-release trailers to point to what I think they were doing with this. And again, I understand, massively successful. So like, it worked, but we're not talking business. But the thing was, there was Lady Deadpool. Now that got spoiled in a trailer prior to the release of the film. And you'd think they'd want to hold on to that. The thing was, I am 95% sure that the reason they stuck that in a trailer was because it had already leaked. And so at that point, they're probably figuring, well, it's already out there. There's no point in us denying it. We might as well try and actually make it part of the marketing. Which makes a certain amount of sense. And especially coming from me, who not that long ago did a video about creators lying, very specifically talking about how things would or would not be the case in their upcoming releases, only to have it turn out they were just completely talking out their rear ends. So you'd think I would fully roll with this because if we already know, there's no point in lying to us. And I expressed my own opinion that I, for one, don't appreciate it when you do. That having been said, let's not treat it like a dichotomy where you either spoil everything or you lie to us. You could just keep your mouth shut. Because in a conversation like this, there's a whole swath of people that I know, people like me who do analysis and are invested in these things, and our audiences generally don't account for what I'm going to talk about. And I'm starting to worry that the studios don't either. And that's casual fans and mainstream fans. Because here's the thing you need to remember. While it becomes super obvious to us that Lady Deadpool was going to be in it, because once that leaked, it's just ran through the circles that I run in, most of my audience runs in, it spread through that really quickly. But not everybody's in that. Actually, FG Signifier put it really well in a recent video, so I'm going to let him say this.
If you are using the internet, you are in an algorithmic bubble. If you are watching this video right now, you are either within my bubble or being invited to it. And if you come here and you don't exit or keep aware of how this bubble works, you'll get stuck here just as quickly as you'll get stuck anywhere else. These algorithms and social media platforms are all connected. So all of your music likes, what do you listen to, your tastes, what your friends like and listen to, the things you comment on, all those things are telling systems what they need to know about you to get you to participate more in whatever bubble you're connected to. And when I say bubble, I mean this very specific view of the world that was made for you by YouTube, by Instagram, by Twitter, by whatever else.
Yeah, you're in a bubble, an algorithmically created bubble. That is the nature of engaging with this stuff online. And I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing in the world that fans tend to be a little bit insular. It can breed toxicity. Unfortunately, I've done a couple topics on toxic fandom lately, but in and of itself, like, you're fans of this, you're invested in this, you're talking to other people who are invested in it. It spins quickly in those circles. But going back to the Lady Deadpool thing, okay, so it leaked. But how many people, other than the hardcore fans, actually tracked down those leaks? I didn't know. Because I do normally keep on top of these things, but I wasn't keeping super on top of Deadpool in specific. And as a result, I actually had Lady Deadpool spoiled by the trailer, not by the leak. Now, a good chunk of the dedicated fandom was spoiled by the leak, but now you're just going to spoil it for everybody? And I know there's a bunch of people out there who are going to go, well, don't watch the new trailers. Except that you never know how much is going to be in a trailer, how many spoilers there will be in a trailer. And more to the point, trailers get pushed at you. Leaks, you have to go out of your way to find, or you have to exist in an algorithmic bubble where you just catch that stuff because that's the space you are dwelling in. But if you don't live in that bubble and you're not seeking this stuff out, you might not know. Trailers, though? Trailers get pushed at you. TV spots, pre-roll trailers in front of videos like mine. I saw the Johnny Storm thing in a 15-second trailer in front of a YouTube video. I didn't really have an option to avoid that. Now, granted, I'd already seen the movie, so in my case, it was moot. But seriously, who are these trailers for? Because, like, with the Lady Deadpool thing, the movie wasn't out yet. So, like, you figure, well, this one thing's already been spoiled. We have a ton of other surprises. So, you know what? We can roll with this one thing. We'll put it out there. Maybe that'll hook in a few more people being curious, and it'll confirm to the fans, like, yes, you found this out. Here it is. But after the movie's already out, and you start putting out massive spoilers in your trailers, who's that for? Because if somebody was not already sold on just the idea of Deadpool and Wolverine together, are you really going to suddenly clinch their interest by showing Johnny Storm? Like, a critique that can be made about all those cameos and all those character pulls is that they don't mean as much to more casual fans in the first place. And I think they're fun enough and handled well enough to still work, but I also have to say that kind of hypothetically because I did catch every reference. I did know who everybody was. I knew why Channing Tatum was playing Gambit. Most mainstream audiences don't. And that's the chunk of the audience I feel like is getting forgotten. Because if you remember that there's a mainstream audience, they may not be rushing out to see this thing first weekend, but, they still want to get around to it. They're the ones who are going to be running into your trailers that now have a bunch of spoilers in them. I think talking mainstream audiences, it's very, and again, like, especially when I pay attention, it really does seem like within the bubbles, at least that I am in, at least to some degree, there really is this assumption that the mainstream is not separate from the fan base. The thing is, it is, though. Like, it legitimately is. I feel like the fact that nerdy, geeky properties have these very dedicated, insular fandoms, very passionate fandoms, that's not new. Like, that's been the case forever. Going back to the fact that Star Trek was revived by its fans and conventions and fanzines and fan fiction, for crying out loud. Slash fiction at that. But, these people are going to be very passionate, be very on top of it, be very into the inside details and the leaks and whatever else. The thing is that as this stuff has gotten to be more mainstream in its scale and scope, with Star Wars and the MCU being, I think, the most prominent and successful examples, or at least successful up to a point, The thing is, I think a lot of people within these spaces and a lot of people with the kind of job I have, they talk about mainstream audiences as if as if the bubble that the fans exist in expanded out to encompass the mainstream audience. And now they're in the bubble too. They're not, though. They're still outside the bubble. It's just that what goes on in the bubble has gotten so loud that every now and then they'll glance over and catch a little, maybe, of what's coming out of the bubble. But mostly it's just they are interested in the same media that those in the bubble are interested in, but that doesn't mean they've entered the bubble. So I look at marketing decisions like putting the spoiler cameos in the Deadpool trailers, and I'm just going, that's the kind of thing that you do if you think your whole audience is in the bubble. And I worry about that just as a perception. It is one of the ways in which I think if a franchise controller or an IP holder, don't like using those terms, they're very sterile and artless, but this is the extent to which I'm dealing with the business side. For an entity like that to start treating the entire fan base as if they are all the most dedicated fans, I think that is a mistake. Not as a one-off, but as a long-term strategy. And I think to a certain degree, Marvel and Star Wars have been doing that. I think you can just look at the fact that Wanda's backstory for why she was evil in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness exists entirely within WandaVision. Now, WandaVision was pretty successful, but it was jumped on by the hardcore fans, mostly the folks in the bubble, with a certain percentage of people interested in, going, oh, Marvel's on Disney Plus now. Let's see what's going on. But it's been diminishing returns with those shows because the novelty's worn off. And so by the time you get to the Marvels with Kamala Khan, and her entire introduction was on Disney Plus, and you really have to start to wonder, and I have wondered this before, because I've said from the beginning, Disney cannot count on the streaming audience to mirror the movie-going audience. Like, that's a bad idea. And they appear to have done that at least a couple points. It's potential that they might be accidentally doing it going into the next Captain America as well. We'll see. But you can't expect the bulk and majority of your audience to be as dedicated as the most dedicated fans. Now, there's arguments to be had about how much do you cater to the hardcore fans. And it's a delicate balance. You generally don't want to tick them off. But if you are catering to them so much that you are turning off the mainstream and the more casual audience, that's a big mistake, because this is what the nerds and the geeks need to be reminded of. And I've said this before, but I haven't said it for a couple years now. We are not enough. Our numbers, the dedicated fans, our numbers are not large enough to sustain these franchises at the scale they are currently at. We're not. You know how big we are? We were big enough to sustain series of novels and comic books based on Star Wars related material from the late 80s into the 90s until we started getting new movies again. When the movies started coming out again, then the casuals who are not as dedicated, and there are far more of them than there are the hardcore, they came back because they went, oh, a new Star Wars movie. They didn't know what had been going on in comics and novels. They didn't know who Thrawn was. People like us did. But there weren't enough of us to cater to at that scale. They had to try and appeal to the mainstream again with the movie. And that's always been the case. So we have a tendency to overestimate our importance and our numbers. And I'm starting to worry that the studios are doing that too. And that concerns me a bit. Will this lead to a specific error in future? I don't know. It's more sort of a mentality and a way of thinking that I think is going to start getting them in trouble. Well, in the case of Marvel, more trouble than they're already in, because obviously Marvel's been seeing declining interest for a while now, which they're now trying to restart desperately with announcements like Robert Downey Jr. being Doctor Doom, which I still don't like. And even if it ends up being great, still in this moment reads as legit desperation. Like, how can it not read as that? How can it read as anything else? But even with something like Alien Romulus, just the fact that while it did hide its secrets, it had to basically sell an entire movie's worth of information in its trailer. It still had to go like, hey, look how much this is like the original Alien. And you go, and the nice surprise is, oh, there's more to it than that. But that they weren't selling more than that. Was that a good strategy? Was that not? Well, it seems to have paid off, certainly. Is that a strategy that's repeatable? See, that's the bigger question. And this is ultimately almost always the problem with corporate thinking. I've said more than a few times, executives think similar to how an algorithm or an AI thinks. They look for something that works and they say, do that again. They look for the thing that makes the most money and say, do more of that. I mean, that's why everything that is a big budget film is a franchise now. We don't get big budget original works very much, hardly at all anymore. That at most hits mid-budget because the things with the biggest returns are established IPs, so you pump the most money into that, you do those the most, but that's not sustainable because eventually people get tired of there not being new stuff. And whether that manifests as an eventual sort of decline in interest for the stuff you keep doing over and over again, which I think to an extent we are seeing with the MCU and with Star Wars, or whether that manifests as somebody actually freaking does come up with something new and everybody migrates over to that because they're like, oh, thank goodness. Which, like, Netflix tried to do that with stuff like Rebel Moon, but, you know, most people didn't care. That was the problem. Like, launching new stuff is hard. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not hearing like, just come up with new ideas. Like, it's not that simple, and I'm fully aware of it. But just the mentality in place. The mentality that says, this worked before, so keep doing it for as long as it works. Like, that's an old mentality. That was a mentality that has been driving sequels since the beginning of sequels. It's just the metrics have changed. Because back in the day, conventional wisdom was sequels made less than the movie before. Now, you kept making them for as long as you still got something out of it. But eventually, you kind of hit the cap like, you know, for how much it costs us to make these kind of movies, we're not making any more. Stop. Like, you can look at something like the original run of Planet of the Apes movies. There were 5 of those. And they had smaller budgets every single movie because they expected lower returns every single movie. And they were right. That was the conventional wisdom. Except now we live in a world where every film is expected to do more than the one before. And even if it more than makes its money back, if it makes less money than the last entry did, it suddenly causes concern. That is happening at the same time that they are continuing to just drill the same stuff over and over and over again. And I know I said I wasn't going to get into the business stuff, but I bring it up because I'm talking about the general mentality that I worry about seeing trailers like for Deadpool and Wolverine, and to a lesser extent Alien Romulus, seeing those films succeed, and I worry about studios then going, well, let's just repeat that trailer thing. I'm going to start being paranoid that movies that have been out for a few weeks are going to start having major spoilers in their trailers post-release. And maybe that's a warranted fear. Maybe that's me being mildly paranoid and it won't happen again this year or next year. And I'll be like, boy, I shouldn't have even worried about that. That'd be lovely. But knowing the mentality of these corporations, I can't help but be cautious about this. And again, not strictly speaking a new problem. You can go back to, which one was it? I think it was X-Men Apocalypse. I think it was that one. There's a Wolverine cameo in that. And they spoiled it in the final trailer before release. I think because they were desperate, because they realized people were not warming up to this movie. So I think that was kind of a Hail Mary pass. I called it out even at the time as a bad idea.
Oh, you.
Now there's no surprise. Now we already know. And this is probably the biggest surprise you've got in the dang movie, and you spoiled it. And it ended up ultimately being little more than a cameo. So anyone who was sold on going to see it because, ooh, Wolverine's in it, he's barely in it, they're going to feel shortchanged. And people who were going to see the movie regardless are annoyed that you spoiled something. There's just this tension between the studios and the audience that has felt really out of balance lately on both fronts, because segments of the audience made up of people like me, we overestimate our importance, and I think to a certain extent the studios are starting to do that too. But then at the same time, the studios are overestimating the willingness of people to put up with what it is they're doing, both in terms of general output and specific moves like this. The balance seems off these days. And I don't have a grander point I'm building to. I just kind of wanted to ramble my way through this because this was two films in fairly close succession that had weirdness, at least stuff that stood out to me happen in the trailers. And I just kind of wanted to talk about it. If anybody can put together a more coherent thesis, I'd love to hear it. If you can, or if you have any other thoughts, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Tarak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Gene Foray, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Tate 808, Becky Sparks, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasparov, Dave Hall, White Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pal Barabajagal, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Oh look, you actually get a face this time and not just butts.